Hello, good evening, good morning, good lunchtime, depending on where you are in the world. I'm super excited to be here live with Sasha Rodricks from Museum of the United Nations, UN Live this evening. So we've been advertising this a bit tonight, and it's just the most phenomenal conversation for me to have somebody here with me who is as passionate about empathy as I am. So Sasha, welcome to OpenRoom, welcome to the conversation.
Thanks so much, Mimi. It is such a pleasure to be here. And I think I have to say, I'm equally excited to have found someone that is as passionate about empathy and wants to have a chat about it and doesn't give me strange looks when I start talking about it. So it's very good. Thank you.
We can stay all night, right? We can just stay, well, night, we can stay all day talking about this. But let's kick off with what the Museum for the United Nations is, because Sasha, when I first heard it, I remember thinking, a museum? What, like a real museum? Or so tell us, what is this museum and what's it got to do with empathy?
Yeah, super happy to share. I know it's a strange one because we say we're a museum and yet we don't have an actual structure anywhere. But we believe we're a museum that goes out and meets people where they are, as opposed to asking people to come to a building that is positioned in one corner of the world. So the way we describe ourselves is that we're a borderless, unconventional museum that was really founded to get the many, so people around the world engaged in the work and the values of the United Nations. And for us to build the power and unleash the power of culture to drive positive global action. And that's super exciting. I come from a world of leadership development and zoology, and I hadn't heard of something quite like this before. So the UN Live doesn't exist in a building structure, but we really do try and meet people through popular culture, so through film and gaming and music and sport, so to really get people to engage in conversations about the challenges that we all face, but doing so through popular culture. So we've sort of created a nice little niche for us, and I'm very excited to be a part of the team here.
Yeah, so how did you get here? How did you end up in this role, Sasha? How are you allowed to be responsible for such an amazing project?
I pinch myself sometimes, to be quite honest. My background, I think I mentioned earlier, was in zoology. So I spent many years in a lab, running experiments and doing things. And I think anytime people ask me, how do you define success in your life, I would always talk about love and empathy. And I didn't know where that came from. I still haven't been able to trace it back. But it's always been part of the way that I define success in my personal life, but also professional life. And so I've been on this journey of going from zoology to sustainability to leadership development. And I'd known about UN Life for a few years, but when I heard about Global We, the program that I lead at UN Live along with an incredible team, I knew in my heart, so my heart's thumping out of its chest right now, because I knew in that moment when I read it that I had to be a part of it. And it's because it talked about building a global we, so building agency, building empathy, building deep human connection, and doing it in a way that you get people who are often overlooked and underserved, and bringing those voices to the forefront. And I thought it's got empathy and love, check. It's got unheard voices, check. I'm from India. I'm currently in Copenhagen and I live here now, but I've lived most of my life in India, and I know what it feels like to never feel like you have a seat at the table, but that you have important things to share and you have perspectives that need to be heard, but you don't quite have a seat at the table. And that really drew me to UN Live and Global We, to be able to use culture and music to really engage people in conversations about challenges that we all face, I think is key. I often think about people I've grown up with and my friends, and I would be the one that was always yammering on about climate change and we've got to do something and we need to consume differently, and people would roll their eyes. And now when I talk about, music and culture and gaming, suddenly people listen, right? Because it's you're sharing information about how to act and do and have positive change in the world through things that people love.
I think we can be best friends, like forever.
I would love that.
You and I share so much passion. But tell me, so Global We, you mentioned it a couple of times there. From a UN Live point of view, what does that refer to beyond the obvious, I guess? But what do you mean when you talk about the Global We?
Yeah, so I think, I've been thinking about this a lot, especially over the last couple of months and everything that's happening in the world right now. And when we think about today's world and how complex it is, there's so much of us and them and polarization. and the gap between people and perspectives and realities is just broadening every day and every passing month. And the
Mm.
global Week was really birthed out of recognizing this huge growing gap and knowing that it's only going to further grow if we don't do something about it, and really thinking about what is it that can bring people together. And the
Mm.
global week was born out of that, about really finding a way to build deep human connection. We talk about digital echo chambers, and talking to people who have the same perspectives, but what does it feel like to come into conversation with someone you would have didn't know existed firstly in the world, but someone that has a very different perspective to yours? And how can you engage in really meaningful conversation to see someone with different eyes? And for that realization and that awareness to help you act differently in the world. So the global we was really born out of that, recognizing the place where the world is, the empathy deficit that exists, and recognizing that through our work with popular culture, we can really help close that gap. And Mimi, I know you do work in empathy as well. So like you and Live and yourself, there's loads others that get to the same point and try and find solutions in different ways. But I'm obviously happy to speak more to global we. But that is, in essence, is sort of where it grew from. And so, we talk about dialogue, we talk about building inclusive dialogue. And the way we do this is through technology. So we've
Mm.
partnered with this amazing organization called Shared Studios, who are technology and execution partners. And what we've done is taken shipping portals, shipping containers,
Yeah.
and created portals that are outfitted with high-tech audio visuals. So when you walk, and we've taken these portals and dropped them into about 25 locations across the world. So if you see a big blue shipping container in the middle of your city, that's you and Live going and meeting people where they are. And when you walk in, you can walk in and be talking to someone from halfway across the world. So we have them in Mumbai, in Mali, in Barbados. At one point, we also had one in Alaska. So, really trying to meet people that are often not engaged in conversations on climate, on health, on education, on social justice, and so much more.
So can anyone walk in to the shipping container? And for anyone that's listening, if you pop on over later to my grid, to my profile, you'll see pictures of it. I put pictures of the portals up there earlier. But Sasha, can any member of the public, assuming they're open, they can walk in, and through this technology, they can then engage with somebody in a portal, in a container, in another part of the world, and start a conversation? Is that how that works?
You can, yeah. And so we've got a sign up form on the UN Live website. So I'm sure someone will pop a link at some point into the live, and you can go and see when sessions are happening in your city and engage. Outside of that, there's also, we try and post. We launched Global We in 2022. And so we've had so many conversations. We record our conversations. We showcase it in different formats on social media. So if you're unable to get to a portal, you can also just engage with a lot of the content that we put out that tries to capture the what makes a portal and a global week conversation important. I think the one thing to say as well, Mimi, because you haven't been in a portal yet, is when
I'm
you
ready. I'm
yeah,
ready.
ready. We've got to get one to Malaysia where you are. When you walk into a portal, all the portals, no matter where they are in the world, they look the same. So they've got blacked out walls. So when you walk in, your brain starts to trick you after a while to make it feel like you're sitting in the same room. We've got facilitators in both of our portals that also help move the dialogue around. Um, yeah, I can see. Oh, Tobele. That's Tobele has been in many conversations in Johannesburg in the portal, and is we're a big fan, Tobele. So glad you could also join. I think just with the global we portals as well, it's great. You can go in, you can talk to people. We've got facilitators that help with the dialogue. But I wanted to share. I've been thinking about this. A quote from one of my most favorite sort of scientists, and her name is Catherine Hayhoe. You probably know about her as well, Mimi.
Mm.
And she talks about this. She says, "Facts are ultimately not what change our mind. What changes our mind about something is recognizing that it connects directly to something that we hold very dear, not up here, but in here." And so the beginning of all global week conversations is from the heart. What with what's really important to someone, right? How do you connect the dots? How do you engage? And to allow people to genuinely express who they are. and what they care about, and in that way start to fix the world's challenges. And I thought she did such a beautiful job of sort of talking about connect. So you're not always in your mind and trying to analyze what someone is saying, but you're truly connecting on a human level. One of the questions we pose questions that are conversation prompts in the portals, and one of them one month was, what does home mean to you? And we had just the most incredibly powerful conversations, because we have a portal in a refugee camp in Erbil in Iraq. And imagine refugees talking about what home means to them, and someone in another city, I think it was Johannesburg, talking about what home means to them, and just how deep you can connect on just what the essence is. It's no longer a building, it's no longer a nice little couch, but truly what is the essence of home. And in that way, we really try and build human connection and try and build empathy. But as you can tell, I feel passionately about it, so I can talk about it till the cows come home, Mimi. But I will stop, and would also love to hear about your work on empathy, because I find it incredibly fascinating.
Well, I mean, what I love about this conversation, as we said at the beginning, is how much sort of shared passion we have. And for the audience, this really is like totally live, right? So we haven't discussed all of this beforehand, and I really feel like I could spend all night here. I think the bit I resonate most with, Sasha, is, of course, your portals, your containers that people are walking into are fundamentally about storytelling, right? Between each other. Of course, they're creating dialogue, they're creating conversation, able to share their stories. And that's why I set up my podcast, Me, Me, You, which is between me and the guest, but it's the same thing, right? It's that creating platforms, just creating opportunities, whether it's physical or digital, for us to hear the realities of other people. Because, yes, we have an empathy deficit, and yes, we all know that, but filling it can be really hard, like from your everyday routine, and we're all in a rush, and we all got jobs and families and careers and all those things. So as I said, what I really love about this, and about what I'm trying to do in my small way, and you're doing in a much bigger way, is creating these platforms for conversation. But what I'm also really interested in, and you touched on it earlier, is that you have facilitators, and I know that you worked with MIT as well with some constructive communication processes to also understand the meaning, right, behind some of these conversations, which I think is also really powerful. Tell us how you're doing that.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think one of the key things about Global We is we don't only try and include unheard voices, but amplify it, and we sense make. So with every Global We conversation, we record it. And with MIT and their Center for Constructive Communication, Cortico, we've actually analyzed what we're hearing in the conversations. And the interesting thing here is not only is there technology in the portal, but we've used AI as well as deep human listening to make sense of what we're hearing through these conversations. So all of the 25 global facilitators that we had were trained up by MIT. And when I talk about facilitators, a lot of these people work in their communities, and they deeply engage their communities in social impact projects and environmental impact projects. And so they're people that are just deeply ingrained in communities. They're not trained in sense making previously. So we worked with MIT, they got trained up and really listened to about 200 hours of conversations, trying to listen to not just the words, but what's behind the words, right? So what are people saying when they talk about climate action or climate challenges in their neighborhood? What does it mean when we talk about war and social justice in certain parts of the world? So we started to draw out insights from this, and it was several months of work that went into it, working closely with MIT, Cortico, our facilitators, using AI, using deep human listening. And very recently, we actually launched some of the insights and the work that we've done with MIT. And again, we'll post a little link in here so that everyone can go. And I think the platform that we've created with MIT Cortico is really interactive. So I'd love to invite everyone that's sort of on this live now. Unfortunately, I can't see faces, but I trust that you're out there. And go to the platform and really engage with some of this. The idea is to make it bite-sized, to make it digestible. We've also used beautiful visuals to try and bring to life the voices and the perspectives of people from these 25 locations across the world. It's only the beginning. So right now we've worked on and sort of pulled out 6 key themes. And it's incredibly interesting. I don't think we have enough time to talk about it in detail here as much as I'd love to, but one of them was in emotions. and just the plethora of emotions that have come up in conversation, and how quickly it is, how easily you can tap into it and build connection through emotion. So there was a lot about like love, care, but also anger and disconnection and anxiety, and how those might channel into action. There was a lot on culture, so culture, traditions, local memories, wisdom, knowledge, the power of individuals as well as communities, and what that sort of amounts to, structural support, so governments, local agencies, local organizations, and then problems and solutions as well. So that's a mouthful, but there's so much on the website where you can actually go in and listen to audio snippets from these conversations, and listen to people's perspectives from Erbil, from Mali, Barbados, Mumbai, Jakarta, um, about some of these themes. And there isn't enough time, but it is. I would just encourage people to go in. It's not a big scientific, boring paper. It is really made so that we can engage the public and engage a really wide audience in really important conversations.
Yeah, and for anyone listening, I definitely advise you go take a look. As Sasha was saying, you can hear people's voices on there. It's like stepping into the world, right, on one platform. So Sasha, there's a question here from Mubashara Khan. She's saying thank you. It, hugely resonates with her. But how do we, you and I, suggest that they can involve themselves in this process so that they can grow their own empathy and compassion and start building a better world for the future? So what do you think, Sasha? What can people do other than obviously visiting the website and listening in? What do you recommend?
Yeah, and trying to join a global week conversation at some point. But I think empathy can also be built wherever you are, right? Walking into a room, if you're in a meeting, if you're out on the street, going into a community. I think a lot about some of the tools of empathy. And Mimi, I'd love to hear how you build empathy with young students as well as companies that you work with. I think one of the key things we've talked about is just deep listening, um, listening to different perspectives without feeling the need to jump in, and counter and argue. And sometimes it's just listening to where someone's coming from and how their perspectives have been formulated. And I know it sounds like a simple one, but we're so used to just being able to talk and talk and talk and talk to people and talk at people. And I realize I'm doing that now, but there is a real skill to be built in just truly listening and being present. I think the other piece is also suspending judgment. Again, as soon as you meet someone, our brain is automatically judging. Da, 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 this is who they are, this is where they come from. I'm assuming this is their perspective, this is their political stance. But what if you suspend judgment? Does that make you more open and present to various perspectives, but also allows yourself to grow? So those are, I think, just the simple and yet profoundly difficult skills to build when you think about building empathy, which can be done in any context. But and again, Mimi, I would love to hear more about your work in this area as well.
Yeah, no, listen, Sasha, I mean, I would agree. I feel that I spend most of my life today teaching listening. And as you said, people think that you're listening, but there's a big difference between listening to reply and listening to understand. So for anyone listening to us today, I would really challenge you to think about that, this afternoon or tomorrow as you go into your workplace, when you're sitting in meetings, or perhaps you're with your family or in your community. How often are you truly listening to the person speaking to you versus thinking about what am I going to say next? Am I going to be on time? Have I picked up my daughter on time? Did I do the shopping? Or the other 1,000 things that goes through our head. So, we talk a lot now about the difference, between listening and hearing. And hearing is a physiological ability that many of us that are lucky enough to have good hearing have, right? You can hear. That's a natural physiological process. But to listen is an active decision. And as you touched on there, so many of us aren't doing it. And we teach our kids, our small kids, we teach all the time, right? So we say, listen to mummy, listen to daddy, listen to auntie, whatever, all the time. And then they grow up and we stop. And we don't teach it at school, and we don't teach it at university, and we don't teach it at the workplace, which is, of course, the work that, I'm trying to do now, is to shift that, right? To help people remember how to listen. So Listen, Sasha, it's been we could stay all night, but I'm going to leave them waiting for more. So it's been such a pleasure to have you here. Everyone, you can find Sasha Rodricks over on LinkedIn. You can find the UN Live and the Museum of the United Nations across all platforms. So do go check them out. If there are any questions, because sometimes the live questions do come through at a different time, so we're not quite live at the exact same time. If you have questions for me or for Sasha, please do comment below. As ever, me and my team, we will make sure that you all get a personal response to that. And you can see the website along the bottom there, museumfortheunitednations.com. Go check it out, see what's going on. It's been a pleasure, Sasha, and I really hope that we can do a little bit more together. But look, there's one question. So Jazz, you snuck in.
Yes.
Just before I let this lady go and have her lunch. So let's just answer Jazz's question there. Jazz says, how does the human spectrum of empathy compare the AI attempts to simulate empathy and build human rapport? He's put an infographic down there. So last thoughts before you run off for lunch, Sasha, what do you think about empathy versus
I must say I am no AI expert, so I don't know if I have a fully formulated response to your question, Jazz. But I think it's just interesting. I think I've been reading a lot about empathy as well, and the use of technology, and I think it's interesting. I think from what I've read, AI can never replace the empathy that you build when you're sitting face to face with someone. But yet, in a world that is disconnected, where more people are in sort of virtual settings, it is hugely beneficial to be integrating it into the building of empathy. And so, I know that we don't have time to get into it much more, but I hope that helps, Jazz, just as an initial. But feel free to reach out, as Mimi said, and I'm happy to chat more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just add to that and say that we don't have time to get into that in full tonight. However, what I do want to say is that people make AI out to be the enemy. And that's also not fair. There is lots of proof. And if you'd like it, Jazz, or anyone else out there, just send us a message that AI can improve and increase empathy, particularly areas such as virtual reality and augmented reality, where there is data and research that shows that AI can actually improve our, as human, ability to create more empathy. So not to mimic empathy, but to help us improve our empathy for very similar reasons to the work that Museum for the United Nations UN Live is doing, right? Giving people the opportunity to step into the shoes of other people. So thank you all very much for being here. Sasha, particularly you. It's an absolute pleasure to start this conversation, and long may it last, because I feel there is just so much for us to talk about. Do check them out over on museumfortheunitednations.com, and we will be back again soon with more conversations in OpenRoom about empathy and the world and how we can reconnect to each other. So Sasha, thank you for coming.
Thanks so much, Mimi. So enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
See you soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.